And happy birthday to the father of modern psychiatry, Sigmund Freud, born this date, 1856. So everything that you say today will be examined 10 different ways. And it always comes back to your mother.
He was a good man, too.
You're expecting me to make a joke there, Bill. And I'm not going.
Yeah.
Darrell Shull might, but I'm not
talking about jokes. We have the master of jokesters right here.
He's on his game today, too. The chief magistrate of local courts is Mr. Darrell Shull. Good morning, sir.
I didn't bake anything last night for you, so I thought I'd come in with some jokes to make up for it. Today's National Beverage Day,
and
I thought about just a couple of splits of champagne, but then that might not be appropriate on a morning show. So jokes are all you get.
If it helps, it's mid-morning.
Yeah, you could have tried. We could have made that decision, Darrell, not you. Yeah, champagne would have been nice this morning. We could have toasted and been nice.
Maybe next time.
Yeah.
Welcome, sir. Good to have you.
Good to be here. I always appreciate the invitation to come on there.
Yes, there's a lot to get to today, not the least of which is the resignation of a magistrate, David DeHaven. Can you provide us any information on that, Darrell?
All I know is that Magistrate DeHaven resigned suddenly, didn't give it a reason. I have to assume that it's very personal, and I applaud him for his service to our community.
What is the replacement process for when a magistrate resigns?
Well, that choice is made by the chief judge. Magistrate court's kind of the common sense court, and I want to talk about that a little bit. We're the firewall against overreach by the state. So if you're arrested for shoplifting or murder, a magistrate is usually the first person you see, and we determine if there's probable cause for this to move forward. We have a lot of arrests for possession with intent to distribute drugs, controlled substances, and potentially you could be held in jail for a very long time awaiting trial in circuit court. So a magistrate is the spot where a probable cause hearing is held to determine if there's enough evidence at least to find it's probable. And probable is a pretty low standard, but it keeps the state in check. So a replacement magistrate needs to be a common sense magistrate. Yes, we have to follow the law. We have to follow some very strict ethics guidelines, but we also have to show some common sense. I listened with great interest yesterday to Delegate Horst's discussion about civil asset forfeiture and the example case that he gave. And it's a magistrate that is able to bring some common sense into that process before it goes too far. And I'm fairly familiar with that particular case. And in that case, the person who did not speak English
You're talking about the motorist who was stopped and had cash seized by a police officer.
And it was his entire life savings. Doesn't speak the language, very concerned. I appointed the attorney to represent him in that matter. And without naming the attorney, because I don't know that he or she wants to be named, but that attorney reached into their own pocket to provide housing for that individual during the time that the civil assets were being determined if they should be returned or not. Otherwise, he had nothing.
Was he local or was he in transit?
He was in transit, and he was of Chinese descent. He spoke traditional Chinese and a culture that is unlikely to trust banks because of history, and kept his life savings in the back of the car. On a civil asset forfeiture case, it's interesting because as a magistrate, we can't ask a lot of questions about civil asset forfeiture, which is why I found Delegate Horst's discussion so interesting. The only thing I can ask if civil assets are taken from somebody, and in this particular case, I can ask the officer, did you have probable cause to seize that money? And the officer says yes or no. I can't ask what was that probable cause, just did you have probable cause?
That seems fairly limiting.
That is fairly
because
limiting.
I could just say yes.
And
I would always say yes, in fact.
So, excuse me, going back to your first thing, you're the firewall. Doesn't look like you're a very effective firewall in situations such as this.
In the case of civil asset forfeiture, no, we're not a very effective firewall, which is why I find Delegate Horst's position very interesting. That it can be a very long time before that case can get to circuit court and return life savings to somebody.
We run a show at 10 o'clock that basically treats cash as king, the Dave Ramsey Show. You shouldn't have any debt, shouldn't have credit cards, which would indicate you're either going to use a debit card or you're going to have large amounts of cash on you, or at least sufficient amounts of cash on you. When did we start treating cash as criminal?
Well, cash is an indicator, but it's not the only indicator. In the case that Delegate Horst was talking about, the individual wasn't charged with trafficking drugs. He was charged with other fairly minor crimes. But the
It's a traffic violation, if I remember.
well, and obstructing eventually and trespassing because he allegedly wouldn't leave the sheriff's parking lot without his cash.
Sure. What would you?
So, so the cash in that situation apparently was an indicator that drugs might be involved, and they called in the canine to sniff out the car. In most trafficking cases, there's a significant amount of drugs, there's packaging materials, digital scales, cash, all of those things combined are indicators that would cause you to have probable cause in a hearing. And there's a great amount of discretion for a magistrate to make those determinations, but not in the civil asset forfeiture. So that's an aside to your question, but I just found it very interesting.
Yeah, and that was a very fascinating segment with Chuck, because basically by carrying cash, he ended up having crimes charged against him that he otherwise wouldn't have had he not been carrying cash. So, for instance, if your cash is seized for no legitimate reason, and then they tell you to leave the police station now, and the only way you can get to the next port where you're going is with cash because you don't have credit cards, then by leaving, you're effectively becoming a vagrant, and by not leaving, you're now obstructing justice. So the entire situation of this man's criminal charges came about because he was arrested for having cash. Well, that just, under any circumstances, is injustice.
Yeah. How did the story end?
So the attorney that was appointed to the case, working with the state prosecutor's office, was able to get the obstructing and trespassing charges dismissed by the state, and the department and the state prosecutor's office voluntarily returned the civil asset forfeiture money to the individual. But as I recall, it was a month and a half or more before that happened. It was a significant amount of time. Now, quite often also, a civil asset forfeiture is used in a plea negotiation. So you had $3,000 seized from you, and you were accused of dealing drugs. But if you'll plead to possession of drugs and agree not to request your money back, not to contest the civil asset forfeiture, will allow you to plead to a misdemeanor possession of drugs. So sometimes seizing the money is a bargaining chip for the state as well.
Yeah. And I'm not naive enough to think that people rolling around with $50,000 cash in the car, that there's not usually something that goes along with that that's not legit. But that doesn't mean I should be presumed guilty because I have cash in my car.
It gives me some comfort, though. If I ever open my wallet in front of a law enforcement officer, they are not going to accuse me of dealing drugs.
Lack of cash.
Yeah, but going back to this gentleman, he was in transit. So was he held here? Was his travels interrupted for a month and a half?
So he was held in jail, pending making bail for a short amount of time.
Short amount, been a few days?
A few days.
Okay.
And then he was held here because of economic situations. He couldn't move on.
Didn't have his cash.
Yeah. So that's an aside, but
let's get back to the topic of replacing the magistrate.
It reinforces the position that we're a firewall and we're a common sense court. And because we're a common sense court, the qualifications that are set in the Constitution are pretty easy to meet. You need to be 25 years old, have at least a high school diploma, and not have been convicted of a felony or a crime of moral turpitude. Don't need to be a lawyer. There's no other qualifications. You just need to be able to exercise good common sense on the court. And when you're appointed as a magistrate, you give up a lot of your free speech rights as a magistrate. We have to be very cautious about what we talk about because we have a very strict code of judicial ethics that we need to conform with. I can't talk about political candidates. Can't be in campaign season. Can't have my picture taken with an elected official or another candidate. Have to be honest and trustworthy in what we say. Pretty common sense stuff, but
that'd probably leave you out, Rob.
There's there's
any court that would want me as a magistrate is a court I don't want to go in front of.
Yeah, Canon 6.2, Rob Mario was disqualified as being a magistrate for all time.
Safe.
So there's a code of conduct that we have to abide by. But then we deal with some pretty heavy subjects. We deal with people's lives. We can take away their freedom. We can take away their money. And we deal with everything from traffic tickets to murder. Each magistrate in our county is going to hear about 2,200 cases this year. It's a very heavy workload, and it's a lot of work. So it's not the cushy government job that people may think it is, and I don't know that a cushy government job actually exists, but this certainly is not it if it does.
Depends on what TV network you watch.
Yes, this is true. So there's it's a lot of work. Now the process, see how I was able to eat up 20 minutes without getting to your question?
I'm wondering why you're dodging my questions. This must be a horrible process.
No, the process is pretty simple. The determination is made by the Chief Judge, Deborah McLaughlin, and she makes that determination. Once she names somebody to the position, there's a 20-day waiting period before they become a magistrate. And that 20 days, anybody that objects to that person's qualifications has to make that objection. And after the 20 days, the person is sworn in, they become a magistrate, and then they stand for election at the next general election. So the next normal general election for a magistrate is not for 3 years. But the individual selected for this position will have to run in exactly 12 months from today in the May 2026 primary.
Do they gather a group of names and interview them, or do they just pick one and you're on?
I don't know what Judge McLaughlin's decision-making process is. I know that she's a very I'm trying to think of the right word. The word is escaping me. She's very deliberative in her process. Mm-hmm. So I would have to assume that she's going to be very deliberative in this process. And individuals, I know that some individuals are interested and have already reached out to her to put their name in the hat. And I would suspect that she will be making her determination fairly soon, because we're currently down a magistrate. And with 2,200 cases each, it's hard to absorb additional cases. I'm absorbing a rather serious and complicated civil jury trial that Magistrate DeHaven was supposed to hear this week. And so I'm going to be assuming that trial this week and next week. But there's not a lot of free time in folks' calendars to be able to do much more. So I would think she's going to make that determination fairly quickly. Chief Justice Wooten from the Supreme Court has graciously appointed a senior status magistrate to come in and fill in the short term to assist us in workload.
Is that a retired magistrate, basically?
Retired magistrate out of Jefferson County.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Darrell, when someone resigns suddenly, there's all sorts of speculation and rumors. But as you pointed out, you're not at liberty to go into any detail. Down the line, is this subject to a FOIA request?
I don't believe so. And I don't know that there's anything to FOIA. That folks resign for personal reasons, and he obviously resigned for personal reasons, and I wish him the very best.
But there's a host of reasons people resign. Some of them can be personal, some of them can be other ways as well. So we don't really know. It's an unknown.
It is unknown.
Darrell, I am surprised when I hear you say the criteria, 25, high school diploma, don't have to be an attorney. And I'm thinking this is a pretty important position, as you've pointed out. What type of law background does someone have to have who's going to fill into this position, or are they kind of potentially learning on the job?
Well, they can be learning on the job. There's a training process. Somebody that steps into Berkeley County has 6 experienced magistrates that are there to assist them. We have all of the resources, Westlaw, all of the books. Myself, I have a fairly good legal background, not criminal law, but I was on the faculty for the Practicing Law Institute. I'm not an attorney, but I was on the faculty for the Practicing Law Institute, teaching some business law subjects for several years, and had previously been appointed by the Supreme Court to sit on the Judicial Hearing Board that kind of sits in judgment of magistrates and judges that may have gotten into some trouble with the Code of Ethics. So I had a fair amount of background. We have some attorneys who are magistrates around the state. We've had some in Berkeley County that were magistrates. Judge Stevens, who's now a family court judge, was an attorney when he was magistrate. Currently, we don't have any attorneys as magistrates in Berkeley County, but that's okay, because we are the common sense firewall court. If you can't convince your neighbor that something is wrong, your neighbor doesn't have to be an attorney to know it's wrong.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned earlier, and we know your sense of humor. How important is that in selecting a candidate? When you talk common sense, you're looking for a person who can laugh, but who can be serious. I mean, there's a lot of complexity, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. There is complexity, and every case is unique. When I took this job, I have a good friend who told me, you're going to hear a lot of cases, and when you go into work, that case is just going to be another case to you. But to that person who's in court, it may be the most important thing they're going to do that year, that decade, or in their life. And so you have to consider every case with the utmost attention to detail on it. But you also, in this job, hear things you don't want to hear. You have hearings on child sexual abuse cases and abuse and neglect situations where an adult is criminally charged with child abuse and trafficking. And you hear things you don't want to hear. And so you have to be able to have a laugh every now and then to keep your sanity. You have to be able to get along well with your colleagues, and you don't need inter-office politics on top of everything else you have going on in the job. And you also have to be able to laugh with defendants sometimes. Some of the people with the greatest senses of humor I've ever heard are people that come in to pay parking tickets. They're nervous, and they get a nervous chuckle going, and they tell you a joke. A lot of my good material comes from people paying parking tickets.
Chief Magistrate Darrell Shull, our guest here on the program. Magistrates did not get a raise this legislative session, as I understand it.
Neither did circuit judges.
And I was told that magistrates are paid out of a different budget. So as a result of that, if they had given magistrates raises, they had to give everybody in that class a raise, and they couldn't afford to do that.
I don't know that that's the case. It all comes out of the Supreme Court.
It was from a legislator.
No, I believe it is different. I think the legislators make the decision for the salary, where for the circuit courts, it's a Supreme Court makes the decision.
Mm-hmm. Well, the salaries for everyone is set in statute. Circuit court judges as well as everyone else. And magistrates have their own line item. Magistrate assistants, magistrate clerks have their own line item. The difference in budget comes when it comes to staffing, because circuit clerks, prosecutors, probation officers, well, probation is Supreme Court, but circuit clerks are county employees. Magistrate clerks are state employees. So that is a different category. I think part of the situation in the legislature's eyes were that the circuit court and family court had modified their retirement system. They have one of the highest funded retirement system in the nation, overfunded. Yeah. And so they were able to reduce the amount the state had to spend into pension. And in exchange, we're looking for that to be added back in to the salary pool for judges. And studies show that judges in this state are drastically underpaid compared to our neighbors. For myself, I think we make a decent salary as magistrates. I'm not going to turn away more money, so that maybe the police will think I'm a drug dealer the next time I open my wallet, but they're not there yet.
But you said a second ago the circuit judge did not get a pay raise either?
The governor, as I understand it, the governor vetoed that, as I understand it.
Did that include the family court as well?
That I don't know. I think it was the same, all included in the same bill.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, from a physical standpoint, office space and where you're moving next, what's the progress there?
We're doing bunk judicial benches now, so it's 2 judges to a room. We are
what they call that, hot bunking, where you're done sleeping and the next guy comes in and takes your bunk while you go to work.
The other idea is just a rotating platform in the middle of the courtrooms, and you just rotate around from spot to spot. We are at capacity right now. With a number of family court judges, they're packed to the gills. A number of circuit court judges. Judge McLaughlin has had to move into the old bank building in a temporary courtroom there. And we have one of our magistrates housed in what had been a meeting room over in the clerk's office. So we are at capacity. I don't know that we could absorb additional magistrate staffing in the facility we are. And we may be in line to get additional magistrates in the next legislative round when they look at that. So I know the county is looking diligently at expanding the Crawford building and renovating that so that we have magistrate courtrooms there, and that frees up space all around the board. And they're working very hard on that project.
Any idea what a timeline might be on that building?
No. Once they get started, it's still going to be a significant amount of time because it's a big project. So we're we're years away, not months away, from that being completed.
All right, the duties of the chief magistrate versus the person or people who are not known as chief magistrate. What's the difference?
So chief magistrate, which I've been for a little over a year now, we supervise the magistrate clerk, responsible to make sure that all of those magistrate clerk records are filed properly. Everything is done correctly there. We're the interface with the chief judge and through the chief judge to the Supreme Court if necessary for additional staffing, as it may be. I'm responsible for making sure that we are adequately staffed. We have magistrates available if you come in for a protective order or to pay a ticket or you're arrested, that we have magistrates that are covering that responsibility. And then looking for ways to be a little more efficient. I think we probably have the most efficient courthouse in the state because we have the highest caseload per magistrate in the state. The statewide average is less than 900, and we're at 2,200 per magistrate. We couldn't do that without wringing out every bit of efficiency we possibly can. So we've reduced the amount of time between arrest and adjudication significantly, probably cut it in half over the last several years. We've reduced the amount of time people spend in jail waiting for their trial. And that saves a lot of money for the county through their jail bill. And we've sped up the process so your wait times in the courthouse are much less. Part of that's because we have a wonderfully designed courthouse and a very professional court marshal service that keeps traffic moving very well under Chief Marshal Lang. And in the courtroom, our marshals are helping us with the administrative process in the courtroom, making sure the proper paperwork gets to the right place, et cetera.
How long of a process will it be until the new magistrate is appointed by Judge McLaughlin?
Well, I imagine she's going to make that appointment fairly soon. I don't know what her timeline is, but I would think that's in a matter of days for her to make that appointment. Then there's a 20-day waiting period. There's some training that needs to be done by the state. So we're probably looking at a month or so before the new person is seated.
But in the meantime, the replacement magistrate will hit the ground running.
Correct. Now, part of the duties of the magistrate is to work 24 hours a day. I'm not going to ask a retired magistrate out of Jefferson County to drive back into Berkeley County at 2 in the morning to sign a search warrant. So one of us will cover those responsibilities, but other than that, she'll be covering court and walk-ins.
Even without the baked goods, you're a good guest, Darrell. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Appreciate you coming in.